Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, in the news this week, we have the United States not wanting to put pressure on any country that deals with Iran because of the sanctions that are already upon Iran. So they're trying to continue to put a little more pressure on that country of Iran. We'll have those details. Also, we have President Xi Jinping of China defending his Belt and Road Initiative. There are some questions being raised, so he had a meeting to discuss the ins and outs of that Belt and Road Initiative. And also a little bit more on a story we covered earlier about Russia wanting to become a Mideast power broker. So these stories and many more, but first, the U.S. ambassador to Russia says the United States is practicing diplomacy by having two of its massive aircraft carriers in Mediterranean waters. Ambassador John Huntsman Jr. recently visited one of the carriers personally and warned Moscow in a statement saying each of the carriers operating in the Mediterranean at this time represents 100,000 tons of international diplomacy. If Russia truly seeks better relations with the United States, it must cease its destabilizing activities around the world.
Well, this is the first time since 2016 that the United States has deployed any aircraft carrier so close to Russian territory. And if that isn't quite enough military might, there are also over 10 ships, 130 aircrafts, and more than 9,000 Marines and sailors present in the region. So it's clear there is a buildup taking place.
Well, Admiral James G. Fogo III, commander of the U.S. Naval Forces in Europe, says these aircraft carriers, quote, provide an unprecedented deterrent against unilateral aggression as well as combined lethality.
Well, Russia has not been silent over the carriers' entry into the Mediterranean. The country's defense minister reacted by saying, "I can assure you our response will be taken in time and it won't necessarily be a mirrored response." He also explained such actions only lead to increased tensions and actually demand a response. It seems like a show of force is erupting, but many are hoping that it stops there.
Well, at the second forum for the Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI for short, President Xi Jinping was on the defensive. Now, he attempted to address some of the criticism that has been directed at the BRI over the last couple years. Now, one major issue is that many countries involved are now in debt by millions and possibly billions of dollars. Now, the concern is that some of the countries who default on their loans will be vulnerable to Chinese political influence.
Other criticisms has to do with the implementation of the initiative. There has not been a high standard thus far, which has resulted in corruption, leading to environmental damages and unfair deals that give Chinese parties the advantage. Well, President Xi spent most of his 30-minute address trying to reassure 37 heads of states and representatives from 150 countries that moving forward, there would be more transparency in the BRI policies, more inclusive to all involved, and offer more green and sustainable financing options.
Well, he also mentioned he will maintain the yuan, the stability of the yuan, not wanting to let it lose its value. And while his speech was meant to soothe the ears of the leaders of those countries involved, it was easily apparent that there was a big presence missing from the forum. Now, there were no prominent representatives from the U.S. or other major European countries who remain apprehensive as to the political agenda of this Belt and Road Summit hosted by China.
Well, the international community has agreed that rape must stop being used as a weapon of war. The United Nations passed a resolution to combat sexual violence in conflict zones, but only after it was watered down. The U.S. has opposed the use of the words sexual and reproductive health, which the U.S. delegation felt implied that it supported abortion.
Well, the controversial phrase was eventually left out as a total of 13 countries supported the amended text. Now, prior to the final version, a reference to a UN monitoring body that would report acts of sexual violence was also removed.
As tense negotiations continued about a draft resolution written by Germany, the South African ambassador to the UN, Jerry Matthews, commented, "It's a dark cloud on the Security Council on this issue that we're supposed to be close in rank and agreeing on. Unfortunately, it's the politics of this."
The U.S. had already fought to get references to the International Criminal Court removed, which was opposed by China and Russia, as well as the words sexual reproductive rights. Now, the meeting ended with the German delegation agreeing to rewrite their resolution. Despite abstentions from Russia and China, after the controversial wording was removed, the Council eventually gave in to U.S. pressure.
It seems like there would be no country on the face of the earth that would be in disagreement with removing that out of any type of bill or law at all.
Right.
You know, using rape as a weapon of war. Well, there's more pressure being put on other countries as well by the U.S. As some are doing business with Iran and buying Iranian oil, and the United States is putting pressure on them not to do so. Our field correspondent Larry McGee has more for us on that. Larry, what do you have?
As the U.S.'s plan to bring down 7 nations continues to gallop forward, the next nation on the hit list is Iran. Iraq has been subjugated. Libya has as well. Somalia is being pounded by airstrikes. The Sudan has been divided, and Syria has been fighting off a coup attempt for years. With the exit of former President Obama from office, the heat is now beginning to kick back up against Iran. The current administration is setting the nations on notice that anyone who persists in doing oil business with Tehran will have to contend with U.S. sanctions. Secretary Pompeo, in a recent press conference, stated that those that have should do their due diligence and err on the side of caution. In the end, he stated the risks are simply not going to be worth the benefits. Analysts believe that the move will hurt the U.S. more than it helps, though. One of the primary nations lined up to be hit by the upcoming sanctions is China, who currently purchases 50% of Iran's oil. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Jing Shuan gave a statement stating that China's dealings with Tehran have been open, transparent, reasonable, and legitimate, and should therefore be respected. His counterpart in Turkey also went on record denouncing the move as unright politically and commercially. The second largest buyer of Persian oil is India, and while they have circumvented U.S. sanctions and purchased Iranian oil in the past, they have reportedly agreed to cooperate and bow to American demands this time. Even so, analysts say it will be very difficult for America to enforce its agenda, since we are speaking of the U.S. potentially attempting to take action against privately owned tankers flying foreign flags, a move which could stir up big trouble for the U.S. diplomatically. For Iran's part, they have threatened to counter the move by closing the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway through which a fifth of the world's oil commerce flows. The current U.S. administration has said that they will stop any effort to do so. President Trump is still making a full effort to negotiate what many people believe is the hardest deal of the century. The president has enlisted his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his former attorney, Jason Greenblatt, to handle the matter, and the pair have reportedly toured Israel in the Middle East, attempting to gain a feel for what is feasible. A third party to their efforts is another attorney, David Friedman, who was reportedly not a supporter of the two-state solution. The picture painted of Friedman is of a man who believes that the Palestinians can be bought off, and that increased prosperity for Palestine's middle class will pacify the people enough that Palestinian resistance will wither and become a distant memory. Mr. Friedman believes that Israel is for the Jews, and he is urging like-minded Israeli leaders to take action now because, in his opinion, Israel has never had a better friend in the White House. The details of the deal the three diplomats have been assigned to forge has been a tightly kept secret, but there are confident suspicions that the contents of the deal, rather in whole or in part, will be released during the 6th month of this Roman year. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, once again, Larry mentioning the secrecy of the Trump administration's peace plan, which is set to be revealed here in the upcoming month of June. But also there we get a little bit more from Mr. David Friedman, who's been working closely with Jason Greenblatt and Jared Kushner on this peace plan, stating that the two-state solution might not be included in this plan. So definitely going to have to wait and see, and that's why everybody is greatly anticipating what possibly could be in this plan.
That's right.
Well, as we brought out in a previous broadcast regarding Russia and its influence in the Middle East, Russia recently hosted a summit with his counterparts from the Arab League. Now, on the list, the U.S. President Trump's administration's agenda on the Golan Heights. Also, Lavrov stated the mutual rejection of the Israeli occupation of the Golan Heights, how it violates all UN resolutions and the UN Charter itself, and is going to increase tensions in the region.
That's right. Russia's view on the matter is getting Palestinian attention, so much so that Mahmoud Abbas said, as reported by the Russian Sputnik newspaper, that the PA would be willing to meet with Netanyahu to talk, but only if the invitation came from Moscow. These moves are what some say that Russia wants the world to see it as, and that's a power broker in the Middle East. That, along with increasing its sway in other areas like Ukraine and Syria, where the U.S. is also challenging that sway from Russia.
Well, with all these political moves by Moscow, it hasn't forgotten the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and these moves may be pivoting Russia back in that direction.
Well, Mahmoud Al-Qasim, an I-24 Middle East correspondent, said regarding Russia's role that Abbas doesn't know if he'll have the full support once the Americans roll out their vision or their peace plan. But the Russian vision is the same as the European vision, and Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and UAE are close allies to the Americans, and no one thinks that they'll turn on the Americans. That's why this meeting at this time with Russia and the Arab League is so crucial to the Palestinian authorities, much more than it is to the Arab League.
Well, but the Arab League wants to look like they're supportive of the Palestinian Authority as well as the two-state solution. So in spite of the expected soon-to-be secretive release of the U.S. peace plan, the Palestinian Authority wants to see that there's an alternative solution that they can rely on if need be.
That's right. Well, lastly, let's take a look at this next video on Senior White House Advisor Jared Kushner regarding the soon-to-be release of the Middle East peace plan.
Senior White House advisor Jared Kushner says the U.S. will unveil its long-awaited peace proposal for the Middle East after Ramadan ends in June. President Donald Trump's son-in-law made the comments during a live interview for Time Magazine's 100 Summit. Kushner said the two-state solution between Israel and Palestinians isn't working, and that the U.S. peace plan will demand tough compromises from both parties. He said if people focus on the old traditional talking points, there will never be progress. Instead, the U.S. plan will involve coming up with a solution first, then figuring out a process to reach that solution. So what is the strategy? Well, according to Kushner, the focus is from the bottom up, mainly focusing on how to make the lives of the Palestinians better and how to increase Israel's security. Ramadan ends June 4th.
Well, even there, Katan, where you can see Jared Kushner mentioning just the same as David Friedman mentioned, that two-state solution didn't seem to be working in the past, so now they might be looking for a different direction. So actually two of the authors of this peace plan mentioning now that that might not be included. So again, it's going to be very interesting to see what this end result here, or the what they come up with through their unveiling of this peace plan, what it all entails.
Right. One thing is for sure in regards to all of the activities of man is that Yisrael Hawkins and the House of Yahweh has taught for many years that this is going to end up in nuclear war. And a lot of people, even scientists, know that. We brought out some articles regarding the doomsday clock being moved forward to, I believe it was 2 minutes to midnight, right? So we know that all the activities with the United States putting some aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean, as well as the activities with NATO around the borders of Russia, the sanctions, the threats, and things like that, it's all moving towards war. And of course, Bible prophecy shows that it would be like this in this time period when Yisrael Hawkins says that when mankind has the ability to destroy all life on the face of the earth, and that's made possible with the nuclear bombs. And if you'd like to find out more about this time period that we're in, known as the last generation, and the teachings of the house of Yahweh that has been brought forth by Yisroel Hawkins, and what you can do to save yourself and family, contact the house of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You could also visit our website at YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you could do so by emailing info@Yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And as you see there on the screen, there's two completely free Bible study helps on the market today. The Yisrael Says program, you can look at that one by going to YisraelSays.com, and the Ask Yisrael program by going to AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Make sure you have your Holy Scriptures and at least some paper and a pencil to write down some very important information, because up next is Yisroel Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Herman.
Thank you for watching.